now that you brought that up, that I don't know if you had something in particular to cover today, but that's something that's been coming up for me is that the foreign code. And I remember sometime last year that Alejandra showed the numbers and found where it inserted, but I didn't understand it at
Mhm.
the time. And I'm kind of wondering about circling back to that.
Like the 972, you mean?
No, not 972. I remember they were numbers. I think it had to do with the solar days.
Okay.
And I think there was something she found in the solar days relative to the calendar where there was a something there was a digit off, like where the foreign code got inserted. That's what I vaguely remember. But I really didn't understand it at the time, and I tried to a bit. I'm not sure I'll understand it now either. But if you had any intelligence about it,
Yes, what I understand is it has to do, of course, with year 1582.
okay,
Remember? Okay.
yep,
Apparatus 396. Uh,
hmm
no, 396. 396, yes. So that apparatus where we shifted from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. Remember
yep,
that there was
yep.
like a certain missing,
Oh, the 10 days.
yeah.
Yep.
And of course, the linear argument for removing those days was that because of the Earth's rotation, we always have some delay that, we have to recover at some point in the calendar. So that was like the linear argument for removing those 10 days. So
Yes.
those that is like one, I think like one that is like the first place where we find anomalies, manipulation of the solar code,
hmm
1582. And then, of course, we have the removal of the gold standard and the insertion of the leap seconds.
Seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, initially the leap seconds were used to destabilize. Of course, the removal of the gold standard has to do with interfering with our interactions as contents of the structure, right?
hmm
Destabilizing our antennas because gold is 97, and that has to do
Uh,
with our,
79, but
sorry, yes, 79. So that has to do with our parabolic antenna, right? So messing with our antennas and messing with support, our support, which is gold as a mineral in the
mineral
solar
kingdom.
code, right?
Yep. Yep.
Removing that support that has to do with our interactions within each other. And then the next year, starting to mess with the time in the third orbital, inserting
hmm
those leap seconds, that was the attempt in manipulating the solar code, which did work for a while, of course. But now that picked up, of course, by Andromeda as support to the solar native code. And that is I think, one of the biggest example of what it is to nativize the code. So it was initially done to manipulate the solar native code, but the solar consciousness taking control of that and using it as a matrix to insert variables, but with the key of Sol now,
Yeah.
through the key of Sol. So the only ones, I'm saying ones because there's no people in that instance, but are the solar consciousnesses are going to be the only ones that are going to be able to edit the solar native code or have access to that through that matrix of leap seconds. And of course, we're still babies. I mean, we're only just realizing that this is even possible, but at least it is possible, right? We know that the human species has this type of access and this type of potential to work with. And if we develop ourselves space temporally in our consciousness, then we eventually might be able to know how to do that, right? But it of course happens in another dimension. We don't do it as humans and as unfolded, right? But as our space temporal consciousness and subatomic subatomic consciousness or particular definition progresses, then our scopes in that area, of course, will be
Mhm.
broadening with time, which is what we call scalar growth, right? So we're
See,
only just beginning.
right. So you said something in there in leap seconds. I not sure I understood it right. I was always under the impression the leap seconds was the planet's adjustment to the change. Is that not the case? Or
Mm,
was that part of the distortion?
yeah, I mean, okay, so the planet, why did the planet need that adjustment? Because the golden standard was removed.
Yes.
That
That I,
was why the planet fell out of its orbit a little bit.
yes.
The ionosphere got unstable, and of course, we as antennas, we got really unstable. So that is why the leap seconds were introduced. But
Right.
it like the detonator was the removal of the gold standard.
Right. But the 27 leap seconds uh readjusted it and reestablished.
Uh, I mean, it was it is a linear
Mhm.
argument to
Okay.
I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
because we're not understanding because of course, the removal of the gold standard is something that somebody thought of that, right? Because of the
Yes.
economy. Because we didn't have any solar consciousness at that point. But of course, if there is no solar consciousness and if there's no particular definition, then all those areas are vacant. And
Hmm.
external consciousnesses that do have a little more space temporal awareness on how things work, they use certain avatars inside the container to do certain things,
Hmm.
right? So that is one of the things they did, the removal of the gold standard. But since we are talking about something, a consciousness that is outside of the local area, outside of the local variables, right? So it is like a plan. It is like a
Hmm.
strategy to first destabilize the planet and then generate these series of needs to insert the leap seconds. When in reality, it was all planned in a way so that um, through these leap seconds, they could stick their hands in the solar native code, in the solar code.
Right. So that kind of rewrites it for me, I guess. So what we're saying is that they used the leap seconds to take advantage.
Yes.
And then, so I guess with that, so that's different than I had understood. So
Okay.
where, in a way, where does that leave us today with to the,
Today, when because okay, what does the Andromedian signal do? It provides support to Sol, because of course Andromeda is belongs to the civilized expressed universe, which is civilized.
yes.
And Sol is barely coming out of the expressed universe, right? But amore, we're just coming out of the express universe. And Ale has explained before that that is like something that a star cannot, it is like a part of the evolution of a star, you know, going through the express universe. But when we're talking about Andromeda, we're talking about civilized, right? Which is where Sol is trying to qualify. So, Andromeda trying to provide support for identifying the solar code, where there are faults, right, or holes or loopholes like we see in the law all the time, and being like, okay, this happened because the solar native code is very young. There is a young star
Hmm.
and it's still right learning. So yeah, I mean, the thing is that everything that came in before this evolution state of or this instance in the solar consciousness, everything that came in before, we can't just get rid of it. We have to
Hmm.
capitalize it, right? So that is like one of the great things that strategy from an external consciousness to have control over the solar code is now nativized and is now in control of the solar consciousness, which is the leap seconds. So now that matrix of the leap seconds, now it's being used by the solar consciousness to manage and administrate increments.
Hmm.
Yeah. So linearly, we could say, yeah, I mean, the leap seconds were introduced to balance things out. Yeah, but why were things unbalanced?
Right, right. I just had viewed it, right, right, the insertion of the foreign code, like kind of makes, and then the disconnect from the mineral kingdom, that made sense to me. So I guess the idea, I mean, so given that this happened, what we're saying is that the sun, that Sol, really just assessed what happened and reconfigured to take advantage of the situation, to make it work in an
Yes.
imperfect situation.
It is as if, I don't know, somebody used a knife to torture you, and then you realized that you had the power to take that knife, and you take it because you matured,
Right,
right? So you take the knife, and of course, you're not going to use the knife to kill whoever was torturing you. You're going to use the knife. You're going to be like, probably you didn't know what the knife was for. So you start to use the knife, and you're like, oh, I can cut my fruit with this. I can, cut my
right. You
clothes,
start using it as
cut
a
my
tool.
hair,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But now the matrix of the leap seconds is going to be used locally with the clave de sol and for the improvement of this entorno and not to of course, to manipulate it.
Right. So an analogy, the leap seconds was the knife originally, where the villain of the story was using it. And now, given that that's what was there, Saul has, uh, uh, again, the analogy, taken the knife and is now utilizing it because that's what's there.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Because it's there, because it's already
It's already in. Yeah.
because that is like like the purpose of a star going through the express universe is to get content and get fuel. So
Hmm.
we need all of that. Like in reality, there is no like villain or there is no
Yeah,
evil, right?
it's really from the future rewriting the past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, because why? Because time only exists in this local area,
Yes.
right? The solar consciousness is subatomic, so
Yes.
it can
Yep.
interfere, right?
Yep. It's just making the choices now and
Yeah, because
now
we are
and
because the
now.
present, yeah,
Yeah.
because the present, the actual present in when we're talking about solar days, that is like the frequency of the present
Yeah.
solar code, the
Yes.
solar consciousness.
Yep.
For us in this
Mm.
present
And
where
it's
where
present.
we
Right.
are.
Right. It really gets translated so we have a means of following, but it's at that level, it's just now.
Yes, yes, yes. But then we're going to talking about the unfoldment of times, which only
Hmm.
exists in this third dimension. It is
Yes.
like it's an invention. It is like a whole infrastructure to experience one occurrence,
Yes.
right? So we do that to uh
To, to
a
manage
sequence an
sequence.
occurrence so that we can experience it
Hmm.
separate, like not all
Yeah.
together
Linearly.
linearly, creating
Yes. Yes.
linearity, and the only thing that really exists is the present. But it's a whole interdimensional infrastructure
Yes.
where we as humans are in the last
Hmm.
place, the last link.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Great. All right. Good
great
run.
way
Thank you.
to begin our meeting today. Our
Hmm.
coming back. Sorry for being absent for, I don't know, was like 3 laps or I don't know, a lot, but I just couldn't do it.
Life happens.
Live, yes, it was pretty intense.
Okay. Everything
Um,
okay though?
Yeah, everything's okay now, but it really wasn't. It was March, June, July, wait, marzo, abril, mayo, yeah, March, April, May was hell. It was really bad. Really,
Wow.
really, really bad. Um, but since I came back from Argentina,
Hmm.
everything is a lot better. I
Great.
feel like there was a lot of interference.
Yeah.
So I feel like the interference cleared
Hmm.
or began to clear. I mean, it's not completely clear, but I had a lot of interference. So yeah. But the good news is that everything is capitalizable. You can capitalize anything, really.
Mm.
If you have a subatomic consciousness, it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter,
Yes.
right? Which is what we're working on. So, but yes, thank you for asking. Everything is
Sure.
best now. All right, so today is the 6th of July, Sunday, 2025. Um, the 6th of the 7th. This takes me, let me check something because I'm trying to see. 6th of the 7th. Yeah. This is something that Alejandra hasn't made public yet, but it is important. 6th of the 7th. Alejandra hasn't made it public, but I think I can explain this to you, which is because it's important. You see, um, this is something that Alejandra calls a solar pattern. Okay? When in a solar day, we have a day that begins with 7 and ends with 6. We are talking about a solar pattern, okay? So, when we found 1971, which is the year when the golden standard was removed, contained between a 7 and a 6, Alejandra calls that solar day the foundation of the leap second. Okay? So when we find the date related to this solar day, we find the 6th of the 7th of 1971. Then it goes on to 1972, the solar day, 1972.
You know what? I'm wondering if you have a different, you're pointing, it does, are you,
Oh,
what,
I'm sorry, I'm not
yeah, you're
sharing.
not screen sharing what you want to screen share.
Sorry, here.
There we go. Okay. Can you start again? Because we weren't looking at
Sorry.
that.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay. So today is the 6th of the 7th, right?
Yes.
And it is interesting that you started asking about the leap seconds.
Yes.
And then the minute I saw the date, I was like, okay, maybe we have to talk about this. And I'm saying Alejandra hasn't made this public. And but I do think that I think we have spoken a little bit about this before. Um, but she calls this the matrix of the foundational matrix of leap seconds. So it is different from the leap second matrix, okay?
Yes.
It's different. Why? Because here we are talking about the solar pattern that I was saying, where in the solar day, if we see a frequency that begins with 7 and ends with 6, we're usually going to find a specific year in the middle. Okay? So, this is like the pattern that Alejandra started to follow, and then she discovered this foundational matrix. Okay? So, the first solar day that she found was 7, one year with the 1971 and the 6, right?
Mm.
We have year 1971 contained by 7 and 6. That gives us a specific date. And that date is the 6th of July of 1971. Okay? So if we follow this logic and we try to locate every year where there was a leap second inside that pattern where it begins with 7 and 6, we're gonna find specific dates, okay? But what we're following is this solar pattern where we find 1972, 1973, 1974, etc. Okay? Until we
But do
have
you,
until 2025.
right. Do you also see how the dates work? And that may not be as, if you scroll down, right, each time, but is that a fun? I'm just wondering if it's something, so each column adds a 10 days.
I don't if it's is it 10 days? It doesn't have to be 10 days.
Right, but I'm saying
But
there's always that, oh, okay, it's a
in the
sit,
first
no,
in the first in the first calculator, it is every year. 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79. But in the next, we don't have leap seconds every year.
ah,
Remember?
yes, yes, yes.
So it changes according to the years where we had leap seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's it. We don't have to get much more into it. Okay? I just think it being the 6th of July, what we can do is see how many years it has been since 1971 so that we can count from that day. So we have
And what's the, this year on the top is 2025?
2025, yes.
And you scroll
So
it,
it's 54. Today, 54 years have passed since this date,
that,
right? Since this, which is quite important, being 54.
yeah.
So we don't have to do much more than that. Just reason this. We are talking about solar code, and we are
Mhm.
babies at this. So there's not much to be done, because we don't want to overdraft our antennas.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna continue looking at this. 187 days have passed in this year, and we still have 178 days. Day 11 of lap 12, and also we have 44,540 laps since the first of January of year one, right? Since we started to use the calendar. In the apparatus, we have 187 and -1274. Global quarantine 4648. We just began quarantine 120. Well, 7 days. 7 days? Yeah. And then here we have other metrics. Alejandra, quinta etapa. The removal of the gold standard, 1968, with a 4. The wheat, right? Which is like the wheat and the Google Day are concepts that Alejandra has been working with the community to clarify and clarify and clarify as much as possible, right? And actually the wheat was very much developed in Event 71. You know that was it vacant 94? Yes. Vacant 94 was given to Morse, Samuel Morse, right? And this is related, of course, to the way we began communicating in the real time of Earth, which is what, like, the main thing that we should know about the wheat is that it unifies the real time of the Earth, and we experience it fractalized. But the real time of the Earth, it's only one. So that's what the ionosphere and the wheat represent as a concept. Um, so look, this is interesting now that we are talking about the leap seconds. Look how many days it has been since the insertion of the first leap second. It's 19364. So we have all of the right side of the calculator right? Contained in a model, which is 14. Okay, so the solar day 739440. So we have an update of all of the models, a solar update of all of the models. 3944. And here we can see Calendaria. We are in the NO cardinality of lap 12, where we know that lap 12 has to do with, it is the first lap in relation to others, right? So it is quite on time that we are meeting back in lap 12, right? Because the first 11 laps actually have to do with ourselves, like how we deal with the year personally and particularly. So now lap 12, we are all updated. We have all gone through our first 11 laps. And it's not just any first 11 laps, it is the first 11 laps of the apparatus, which is even more intense because we are receiving, when we are reading the metrics of how many days of the year have passed and how many days of the year we have left. But then we have the reading of the apparatus. We have 180, how many? 187 days of the apparatus have elapsed, and we have 1074 days to go from the apparatus. So that means that on an Asuma year, it is blue. Remember, blue has to do with the double. It has to do with another instance of myself that is outside of the cycle, right? That is blue. So usually the Asuma year is quite chaotic because what are we assuming? The first day of an apparatus, we are assuming what the apparatus is going to be about. But it's all blue. It's not very clear. It is all mostly chaotic because we are receiving, of course, novelties. Remember that for the solar consciousness, an apparatus is a unit, right? We have to fractionalize it to be able to absorb, to create the consciousness. But then we have Asimila. The next year, 2026, is an Asimila year. Remember the stomach? We're going to be assimilating what was assumed in the first year of the apparatus, right? So it wasn't just any 11 laps, it was the first 11 laps of the apparatus, of the first year of an apparatus. Okay. So for me, it was very clear, and for you guys, but it was truly a lot. Okay. So let's go to the red program. I'm going to try to translate it. You guys can see? Okay, so it's a red program 139, okay? And they did it on day 177. And Alejandra reads that as the consciousness of the receiver. So my own consciousness is the only one that can unlink me from the receiver from another receiver, right? Lap 12. So basically, like if lap 12 begins with frequency 177, what does that mean? It is that my own consciousness is the only one that can unlink me from another receiver. If I don't have a specific reference, conceptual reference in my consciousness integrated, I'm not going to be able to do that. So that's where cloning happens, right? I'm going to be cloning myself because first of all, I don't have awareness, a particular consciousness, which then translates into definition in other levels until we reach the anatomic, right? If I'm not working in my particular definition, then anatomically, then I'm not gonna have an identity outside of this local area. So I'm not gonna be able to separate myself from others. Um, so Ale says here, if I don't use the the space of the space temporal consciousness, it will be impossible that I am able to see someone else that isn't myself. Right? So we are talking about space temporal consciousness, space temporal awareness. If I am not actively working on this, and cloning is something that we all do. And it's gonna keep happening, of course, because we're not gonna learn how to undo this uh, from one day to the next. But at least we can be aware that we are working on that. So I am going to be using the other that is not me as a space of projection of myself, but I am never gonna see the other person actually, right? Because that person is gonna be, I'm only gonna be using that person as my own mirror. I'm only gonna see, like, if there's a minimal similarity that I find in someone else that I meet with myself, then I'm gonna use that minimal similarity to create a big mirror of myself. So I am only gonna be seeing myself, right? Which is like a huge thing. Not seeing others as they are. I don't know if it has happened to you. Like my elder aunts, one of them, she has this thing where every new person she meets, she's like, "Oh, she looks like I don't know who. Oh, she looks like I don't know who. She looks like I don't know who." So it's never anything new. It's always like it is an immediate association to something else that she saw somewhere else, right? Um, so that is maybe a way, maybe she's not cloning with herself, but she's cloning with somebody else that she, you know. So I think that is like something very particular, but because it is an automatic association. I don't realize this is happening. It is an automatic mechanism. So she says, lab 12 is like an alert. Why? Because it is the consciousness, the one that has to tell you that that is another person, because the mind is going to be fooling you. If the consciousness is not there, the mind, if the consciousness is not actually working with the mind, then the mind works in automatic. So if the consciousness is alert, then I know that that's another person and I'm not cloning myself. But this doesn't happen if the consciousness is off. And why does she say it? Why does she say using the space of the space temporal consciousness? Because we have 177, 71 is space. So we're talking about a space temporal consciousness. We're not talking about temporal spatial consciousness or an analogical consciousness because it's not the same, right? With an identity crystallized in the anatomic, I can't do much. I'm gonna be feeling trapped all the time. Um, so if I don't do if the consciousness is not alert, I'm gonna be cloning myself, right? If the consciousness is off. Um, so if that happens, the container is going to be, it's gonna be like a mirror for me so that I use the other to project myself. That is like the automatic mechanism. And the other person is going to do the same with me. So now imagine why I think we have now a crisis in our relationships and the way we interact with each other, right? To the point that we are escalating in genocide because I cannot accept the fact that others are different. They have to be exactly like me. And if they're not exactly like me, I have to kill them, right? So this is like the highest level of distortion in in this automatic configuration when, of course, the consciousness is off. So that how do you call, what is the word when you are walking in the desert and you are very hungry and very thirsty and you imagine an oasis? They call it espejismo. What's the word in English?
A mirage?
Yes. So she says the only way that the mirage can be broken is with the consciousness. But she's saying when we're talking about consciousness, I am talking about solar consciousness. We're not talking about human consciousness. Because if we're using the human consciousness, we're late. Because we're the last link, okay? Why? Because the human concept depends on a collective memory. When the solar consciousness depends on a particular consciousness where there is no memory. 789, no memory, no time. When we're talking about memories of the container, if we're talking about a memory, we are talking about a time unfoldment, right? So we're talking about the third dimension, we're talking about analogic instance, which is the last. If it's the last instance, then we cannot use that to anticipate anything, right? Because we're going to be always late. So we have particular consciousness, and then we have collective memory. Two different things. The human concept is based on a collective memory. The particular consciousness, no, it's particular. So that's why for the people that are craving evolution, I don't know for you guys, but when I'm very excited about when I hear that particular consciousness, I get excited because I'm like, oh, that's like air. That is another type of connectivity that's going to allow my human profile to improve the quality of its own code. And not only that, but I am going to actively be part of the improvement of the entorno that allows my human profile to thrive. So it is a partnership between the entorno and the human species, which is the original plan, right? But because the code was very precarious, we had all these kinds of interferences. But the original plan, of course, was this partnership between an entorno and a species that serves as a container. But now, like the state of evolution of the entorno, the solar local area is providing this particular species to also evolve, right? To also regain this connectivity and this possibility to develop consciousness at a particular instance. Um, So the only way that I can create updates for the collective memory, the only way I can do that is if I am connected at a particular in the particular level. If I am not connected in a particular level, I am never going to be able to create any kind of updates. I am going to enter into a repetitive cycle of some kind, whatever kind. But it's going to be a repetitive cycle. I'm going to be stuck inside a cycle. Why? Because my identity is only analogic. I don't recognize any other dimension. And if I do, I delegate it to an external consciousness, God, religion, whatever, to do it for me. So yes, someone is gonna do it for me, but me, I'm gonna be stuck in there in a cycle. And then when I am no longer of use to that external consciousness inside that particular cycle, I'm gonna be used as currency. So Ali talks about, yeah, in social media, you hear people talking about, oh, I was alive in another planet, or, I had other life somewhere else. Well, yeah, if you are not particularly connected, defined, if you don't have that appetite of creating an identity at that level, then yeah, you're going to be used as currency. because why as currency? Because there is credit from the primary unfolded there. But if you don't have a particular definition, that credit is going to be used by someone else that lost their connection to the primary unfoldment. So that means that I am not going to be the author of that program that I'm going to be experiencing. So I'm not going to be able to make any changes. That is where we socially find these phrases where it is destiny, or it was meant to be, or it wasn't meant to be. You know, if it was, it was, if it wasn't, it wasn't. You find these types of arguments socially, and it has to do, of course, with somebody that is not the author of their own document, right? Because for me, my destiny is like I am able to rewrite, even if it's just in a very tiny part, I am able to be a part of the change of my own destiny. You know, I don't have that perception that my life is what is going to be and I'm going to die on a specific day and there's nothing that I can change about that because everything is God's plan, right? No, it's not God's plan. It is a program. But if I am developing consciousness at a subatomic level, at an impersonal level, then I am going to be slowly gaining participation in the update of the destiny, of my own destiny. And not only mine, but because if I am introducing changes in my own particular code, I am going to be having an impact, of course, in the collective field. And this happens in big level, small level, all kinds of level, depending on the scope, right? But if I do have a connection in a subatomic level, I'm going to be able to introduce certain updates to the cycle and, of course, having a certain impact in the collective field. Okay. So if I am not the author, if I am not participating in the creation of that cycle that I'm going to be experiencing, then it may seem new to me as an experiencer, but it certainly will not be new for the container, right? So it is just like a particle that inserted themselves in whatever entorno because they wanted to have an experience, and they experience a certain thing, and that it's new for them, but it's not for the container. It is a pre-written path, right? A pre-codified path that is there. It's available if you want to experience it. So yes, I can live it, but it's going to be whatever author. It's going to be XX author. Why? Because it's going to be predetermined by the collective memory. So it's always going to be giving me this mirage of this other that is not me, because I am using that space to project myself. That's all I'm doing. So a person that is configured that way, the more Alejandra can say 10,000 things, but that person is going to have their opinion. They're going to have whatever opinion, and it's not going to matter. So Ale says, we're now in lab 12. Lab 11 was the most chaotic and unorganized thing in the world. And also, of course, because there was the event, right? So this time, Ale has been talking about how now she can only do 1 or 2 events a year, when before she would do one a month. Why is this? This is why now it's because Alejandra is now assuming the unified field. And the unified field gets nourished from an octave that has already happened, that has already been experienced. But the thing is that now we could say that we are experiencing an octave that we previously established, right? If we're talking about LGC. So now what Alejandra is dealing with now is she's now dealing with the occurred event because that is the premise of the event. She is following very strictly the instruction that she's receiving from the universe to be able to create improvements to the solar code. So one of these improvements is to be able to differentiate everything that we are learning to differentiate, right? Something that really clicked lately, and Ale was very, intense about it. She always says, like, it is not that Alejandra is a genius because Alejandra is receiving an instruction. The marvelous consciousness, we're talking about the Andromedan signal and the solar consciousness. That is the genius part. It's not that Alejandra is the genius, right? She's just trying her best to explain what she's receiving. And she says that it is precisely because she's not special, because she's quite common, that she's able to do this. So that is like, I think it's great because another thing that she always says is that, okay, when LGC becomes a little more public, we have to eradicate any sign of mysticism. No sign of mysticism needs to be there when it becomes public. Because I can see in the community still, like I heard this girl say in the event, she was like, yeah, I mean, Alejandra talks and I believe her because I don't know, I don't get it. Um, okay, if you don't get it, if you have to believe what Alejandra says, it just means that you haven't actually been following what she's been constructing throughout the years, because for me, I don't have to believe anything. For me, it's all a construction, and I have been part of that construction, and I've been there. So I know that she is not making things up, or, I know where the things come from. So even from inside the community, we still have that now. That's why Alice is very clear on saying that she's not going to receive anybody new because she can't. She just she just can't, right? She's limited. She's a limited human. And also because from inside of the community, we still have that going on. So there was a lot of synchronicity from before the event, during the event, and after the event, right? Um, so she's saying she's focusing on the occurred event, um, because that is like the premise of the event. And now she says, I have a documentation that can explain to me up until where the improvement happened. So, another reason why she says that there can only be one event or two a year is because Alejandra is now integrating the unified field. And this is a consequence also of her assuming her last name, right? Well, she first assumed Casado and then she assumed Wozniak. So it is as if she's barely constructing a more concrete human identity because she didn't have one at all, right? It was purely impersonal. So now she is a little bit measuring the improvements of the human person, Alejandra. Okay? Why? Because it depends on the fourth cardinality to provide the function. Because it's the one that closes the octave. With an open octave, you can't function. I don't know if you guys can identify this. Like when you are in bed and you're just like I don't know where I am. I don't know who I am. What is going on? That is an open octave. And when the octave closes, you get functional because you integrate whatever was new in the flow of signals. But the thing is that what are we doing now? We are establishing a new quality of this container. We are establishing a new quality in the container. So on one side, she is functioning as a human, but on the other side, she is establishing a new variable in the container so that there can be a new interpretation about something that already was there in the container. So that variable has to do with being able to have another interpretation about something that was already there in the unified field. Okay, so an octave that has already occurred becomes part of the document. And that new variable is something that is that's gonna open a possibility to have a new interpretation on something that has already happened. Okay. So synchronicities that happened in the event. These are Alejandra's days of life, which is 20279. From the future, we can see 972, right? And this is when Israel was attacking Iran. Another synchronicity was Mendeleev's days of life, because one of the most important things, or the most important thing of the event, was the presentation of the periodic table, the full new, brand new periodic table. And it was amazing to see it in the stage. And Mendeleev had these many days. Crazy. So, how does Alejandra read that? Closed circuit in 3 channels. And precisely the 4th channel, which is the 9, is the updating factor. See, nothing mystical about this, right? If we follow this reasoning, it makes sense where Alejandra gets things from, right? There's an articulation of a consciousness when we see, okay, Alejandra says, closed circuit in 3 channels. You guys catch that? 3/8 or no? Closed circuit in 3 channels, 3/8. And then the 4th channel is a 9. So we have the updating factor, 9. Okay? So this is what was happening when Alejandra was presenting the table of elements, which is what she's presenting as an update to the solar code. Now, the same way we were talking about the attempt of destabilizing the Earth's orbit to later insert a way to stabilize it through the leap seconds and create these holes in the matrix of the orbital to manipulate. Something similar happened with the last periodic table, where we had all those empty spaces in the white. Remember? So this completion of the periodic table has to do with that. It has to do with creating a membrane, which is what we have from helium to hydrogen, that is going to serve as a sort of filter into this local area. Okay, it's not going to be an open door or an open window. That is like the update of the solar code. I mean, can you believe we're talking about that? She didn't develop the functioning of that. She just presented it, okay? Okay, so then she talks about resonance. Resonance is supported in a mute area, okay? So maybe we ask each other, why did we go? And we can't say why we went, right? We went because we resonated. So when we're talking about mute zone and resonance, we're talking about something that has no neurological support. Why doesn't it have neurological support? Because it's something that's brand new. It is not, it hasn't, it doesn't have anything to associate it with inside the memories of the container, right? So that's why it doesn't have neurological support. That's why we can't talk about it. And that is why the creation of concepts is so important, because the creation of concepts is also generating neurology for us. So that we have a place to support the flow of signals. But also, not having neurological support or having a resonance on the mute zone is very natural at a subatomic scale, because of course there's no neurology, there's no memory there. So it is quite natural also. That's a quality that's never going to go away. That mute area, right? It's like an area, just a space outside of existence. So when we're talking about the mute zone, we are talking about something that begins to operate a lot before we are able to speak about it, because our neurology serves us to communicate with each other. But if we are connecting with something that is prior, and when we're saying prior, we're saying prior in vertically, not horizontally, right? Prior, it is operating prior to us being able to speak about it. So when we are creating neurology, that neurology is going to be descriptive of what has already happened, which is the occurred-octave, right? Sometimes we are experiencing something that we can't explain, right? And I think all of us have had that experience, that we can only explain something after it happened, because I explained it first to myself and then I can explain it to others. But while it's happening, you can't really explain it. There was music in the event, which Alejandra is very surprised. That song. And there was an opening of the table, but it was very basic. She didn't develop anything more. The linear argument for the song has to do with the discovering of America and a social function. That's the linear argument, right? But for us, 1492 has to do with having a receiver for apparatus 492, which is the apparatus that is the anchor of apparatus 493. Okay? That is another channel. When we have that reading of 1942, the receiver of apparatus 492, we are reading that in another channel, right? The solar consciousness channel, not the social channel. The social channel is an area, it is a scale that has the license to have liberty, to have their own understanding and their own opinion about the universe. They can think and have an opinion of the universe however they want it. But there are other channels, and they are not perceptible for many. And that is not wrong. Because why are this other channel not perceptible for many? Because subatomic scale evolution is not a condition. It is an option. No one is going to force you to evolve at a subatomic level, right? Because you can always go back to primary unfoldment and there's no time there. The thing is that when we're talking about secondary unfoldment, where we have matter, we do have to fulfill many conditionals because matter is part of a great like credit, a credit to create the third dimension. It is an invention. The third dimension is an invention of who invented the third dimension, previous frequencies that are not participating directly, but they keep the balance of the field. Okay. Another thing that happened in the event is that Rupert Sheldrake, he always talked about that morphogenetic field, right? His days of life were 30303. And base 30. What is base 30? Third orbital with sun, right? And we have 30303. So it's base 30 from the container and from the content as well. Okay, so if we want to send ourselves as human experiencers, that's okay. The architect that's going to be managing my experience is going to be external, and that's not wrong either. But we shouldn't either be demanding other people that are only here to experience a human life that they come and learn about whatever we are learning, because that is not their topic. They're not here for that. They are here to have a human experience, and that's it. The thing is that the kind of experiencers that would come here, because of the state of the solar code where it just allowed any kind of thing to come in. There was no regulation, right? Because in the express universe, there's no regulation. And that's the good news, that's the improvement of the solar code is also going to have higher regulations in because we're still gonna have experiencers. Of course, we're still gonna have that all the time. But the regulations and the restrictions to experience it are gonna be higher, right? It's not gonna be like open to all public anymore. It's gonna be a little more exclusive. So the fact that there's always gonna be human experiencers, we should also respect that not everybody's here to evolve particularly. So evolution at a subatomic scale is not mandatory, it is optional. There is no requirement to do it. The only way that a consciousness is going to evolve, subatomically speaking, is when that consciousness self-evoked to do that. I sent myself. My own consciousness sent itself to do that. So it places itself in the third dimension as a constructive element. If there's a consciousness that wants to evolve, subatomically speaking, it places itself in the third dimension as a constructive element. Okay? So that is why we have the convergence between Mendeleev and Alejandra Casado. So what is 972? Ale always relates that code to the parabolic antenna. Why? Because she has to use the parabolic to update the circuit. 972 is an absolute update of the circuit. Yeah, 797. Absolute update of the circuit. And then she says, I need to update circuits. Okay. She also talked a lot about the musical notes in the event, and we really couldn't move away from there because what Alejandra was trying to do was trying to registrate the difficulties that people had or that we all had understanding the concepts, right? And there are many, many difficulties. And she wanted to personally identify these difficulties because her commitment is to create educational tools for the people where they actually are, right? Because Alejandra needs to actually interact with us so that she knows what we need to actually understand this. But she can only work with the people that have a high resonance with the resource. And she's not doing anything socially because this was something that was that possibility, like this massive call, this massive portal, the solar alarm went off in 2012. So it was open for everybody. It was open for it to be more massive. It just turned out not to be. That portal of 2012 is not open any longer. What we're doing now is that we are executing everything that we have achieved in the synchronizing with this signal between 2012 and 2021. We are executing everything that we have achieved in that time lapse. So that's why we're talking about Oganesson and Toganesson, because we are applying base 21. Oganesson 118, Toganesson, which is T21, 119, which is the update. But the update has to happen in the immaterial area, not in the material area, because if it happens in the material area, it explodes. So we are applying base 21, but that is for the ones that picked up the signal in 2012. It's not for everybody. The rest of the world is in that social area, and they're gonna have questions and they're gonna have questions, of course, but all of the answers and the explanatory mechanisms are gonna be social. While us, we are self-defying to add or subtract that famous fourth cardinality. So this is like the difference that she is very intense when she's always saying subtract the fourth cardinality when you are receiving LTC and then learn to add it when you need to add it. And that is the difference between a solar and a social. The social cannot remove the fourth cardinality because it's what keeps them functioning and they have no other support. But we are working with four cardinalities, not just two. So we can remove the fourth cardinality whenever we need to. Because remember, the fourth cardinality has to do with the unified field and the memories of the container. When we are inserting a new variable, we don't need the memories. So where do we begin to differentiate. Is the receiver linked to the collective memory, or is the receiver linked to the particular antenna? Because if it's more connected to the particular antenna, we're talking more about the electric aspect that is more prominent. If we are more linked to the collective memory, it is the magnetic variable that is more prominent. And the magnetic is, of course, blind. So being able to reason from the particular antenna without using the collective memory is an exercise. We have to exercise to do that because we're talking about consciousness, right? When we're talking about consciousness, it means that it's not going to happen automatically. And I see that error in the community all the time. Things that happened magically or automatically. Then there's no consciousness there. See? There needs to be consciousness on how or why things happen. So reasoning outside of the collective memory is an exercise, but it is not mandatory. So whoever resonates with this, they do it and they self-impose a specific regulation. Why? Because I have worked on my understanding of primary and secondary unfoldment. I understand primary unfoldment has no evolutionary requirement. Secondary unfoldment has an evolutionary requirement, and there are regulations. So that's the only way that I can accept regulations as something that's necessary because I understand secondary unfoldment and because I put myself there. So there is a training, but you cannot train a person that only has a social consciousness and their identity is completely subrogated to the collective construct because they're gonna burst. They can't do that. So what was like the solar alert in 2012? Recreate the external source. Recreate the external source. A solar consciousness will activate the recreation of the external source. A social consciousness will not, because it's disconnected from the universe. It's very much connected to the collective memory, but it's very disconnected from the universe. So that person is going to only work under a program, which is a horizontal octave, which is limited and programmed, and there is no option to update anything. It is just you're born here, you go through something, and then you die, and that's it. So they operate under a program, but not under an octave. The one that operates under an octave will be having changes. So a person that is subrogated to the container will only be changing as the container itself changes. But it cannot do anything that is not what the masses do, right? Because they enter into a brutal contradiction and they can't handle it. So, there was like a gap that opened since 2012. And there's, of course, going to be consequences. And there's a restructuring that the container is suffering that, of course, takes our biological bodies and makes our bodies part of that equation and that reconfiguration of that equation. Our bodies are part of that equation. So, of course, if there's resonance with this, there's going to be doors opening, and things are going to happen to the body. And they're not going to be nice things because our bodies are being part of that reconfiguration of that equation. So when people say that she analyzes 972, no, she doesn't analyze it. She describes how she uses that parameter. She's creating neurology because it is the first time that this happens inside this container. But the good news is that every time we have a more refined description of the resource, but the thing is that whoever is listening to what Alejandra says, that is the person that is analyzing from their resonance. They are analyzing what Alejandra is describing, but Alejandra is not analyzing. She's describing. So 672, we know that that is the code of Antarctica, and then we have the code of Israel. There's a connection between these two, of course. And it has to do with the parabolic, which is the one that affects, maintains, and updates the unified field, the collective consciousness. Now, if I am only identifying with the collective consciousness, can I do this task? Can I perform this task of providing support to the solar code, to helping maintain and helping update the unified field? Can I perform this task if I am only identifying as a human in the collective consciousness? I cannot perform that task. So, if I cannot perform that task, that variable remains exposed to cosmic influences. And what will the container do? Whatever it always does, which is its task, which is to balance out the equation of the compound. So it's going to drag receivers around to wherever the field needs them to be to maintain that balance, to reestablish that balance. This is the reason why statistics function, because of the unified field. So she provides a specific focus from the space-temporal structures, but other people choose other focuses that are within their ranges, and that is fine because we are describing the same things but from a different angle, right? The thing is that this angle has its own particularities, its own configurations. So Alejandra cannot do anything that is not under the synchronicity of the space-temporal structures. That is why event 71 is framed inside lap 11, inside the NE cardinality in the Sume year of 507. This is a strict premises from the space-temporal structures to frame that event in that specific structure, place of the structure. So we have Oganesson and Toganesson. Oganesson 118, the octave that maintains the context in a coagulated, I don't know how to say that word, like unified. 118 is the octave that keeps the context unified. So when the context is updated, when the context is being updated, I am going to need a variable online that allows me to continue to participate inside the unified field. If I don't have that variable, it means that I'm not going to be able to support that update. You know how some computers can't support certain updates of the software, right? So when the context is being updated, I am going to need an online variable to be able to continue to participate inside the unified field. If not, I'm going to have to die and be reborn. That's what Alejandra calls the update, because we enter into the digital era, and whatever is digital is the origin of what we know as anatomic. Okay? So how is it that we don't recognize the origin of everything, which is everything and nothing, right? How is it that we don't recognize that? Because our connection was interfered, right? So if I recognize that source, I am not going to be offended when somebody tells me that I am nothing. If I get offended if someone tells me that you are nothing and I get offended, I have a problem because I don't recognize the origin. Okay? Because the origin is nothingness itself. That's why it is possible to receive infinite occurrences. Because everything is the consciousness of nothing, and it has infinite occurrences. Now, if I identify myself with something, and on top of that, it is something that has a memory, we're talking about third dimension. If I am only identifying there, I am subrogating to an architect that is outside of this box that has a memory. But that's okay because I feel comfortable there. I feel comfortable because I don't have any responsibilities. Okay? I am delegating to an external source the responsibilities I have at a particular scale. I am delegating it so that it can provide me with occurrences. Yeah, so we hear that all the time. Ask the universe, because it isn't on a budget or something like that. I recently heard something like that. Ask more from the universe because the universe is not in a budget. Okay. That's comfortable. Now I'm delegating my responsibilities of the particular scale to an external source. It provides me with occurrences. Okay. The other option that we have is to recognize the link with the source. And the source is nothingness itself, right? So if the origin is nothingness itself, then the destiny, it can be there are other possibilities than anatomic, but in our case, the destiny is anatomic, but it can be any other thing. That's what Alice says here. See? The destiny can be within all of its other possibilities, anatomic. In our case, it's anatomic. In our case, the destiny is anatomic. Okay? But that destiny is present. It's not past, it's not future, it's present because the subatomic scale has no past and it needs no future because it's a spatial consciousness. The word space, espacio, adds up to 71. So everything that Ale has been talking about has to do with the space temporal consciousness, not temporal. Because what is time? Time is a quality of space. So if I am identifying with a quality of space, I am recorded in that space as a unit of memory. And I am not going to be able to remove myself from those partial temporal configurations that have me effectively linked to that point. This is very powerful because it can keep us trapped. If I am identifying with the quality of the space, I myself remain recorded there as a unit of memory, and I cannot let go of those configurations. If I am effectively linked to that temporal characteristic of the space. So, if I, as a content, I am linked effectively, the container takes me effectively. See? If I am effectively identified as a content to a temporal quality of the space, the container takes me effectively. Because I'm not identifying with the spatial quality. I am identifying with the temporal. Okay? Now, if I am in charge of the effective as well as the affective, then I can create different kinds of interactions. And I can improve the interactions, creating different positions. Okay, so if I am also human, I have a human profile also. Because she also says that it's not good to say I am a human. Soy, to be, right? That is a very risky word if I say I am a human. It is better to say I have a human profile as well, but I am originally a subatomic particle, right? Okay, so if I have a human profile, that's great. I can use it to create improvements to this container about the human profile. But if the humans don't do it, the rest of the species will do it. Animals are evolving. They are doing it. Because social media is full of dogs that are saving cats or cats that are cuddling mouses. And here we have the human species trying to figure out where they're going to send the next bomb, right? So what's happening here? Where is the interference? We have that interference in the human species, not in the animals. The animals are not interfered. And people keep calling the most stupid people of the human species, they keep calling them leaders, right? Because people don't call leaders, they don't call leaders the people that are actually finding out new things. They're not calling leaders the people that win the Nobel Prizes on science. We don't even know who they are. Why? Because we don't understand what it is, so we can't call them leaders because we don't even understand them. So we call leaders the stupidest of us. That is like the base of the social consciousness. That's what we call the leaders. And that's where we have the problem. We call a leader to the person that needs the most therapy. And the actual geniuses, they are invisible. Of course, because we don't understand what they do. It would be an evolutionary challenge to try to understand what these geniuses are doing, right? It is an evolutionary, imagine what we are doing here in LGC, reasoning all of these things, that's an evolutionary challenge. But this can only be done by someone that has that appetite. Because if we don't have that appetite, then I don't need to understand any of that. I'm just here for the experience, right? So here we are in the middle, creating space-temporal consciousness. Okay. 20, there were 22 countries represented in the event. Okay, just announcements. Okay, let's have a little break and then we can continue. Okay? 10 minutes. See you in at 50, 51. Minute 51. Because access we can all have because of the antenna.
Right, just thinking in terms of the, the Mente
Mm-hmm.
in the Northeast is how I recognize it, is rather than trying to contain it, access it. So when there's a need or a demand on the system,
If there's a demand from the context, I am only going to be able to respond with what I have in my reach.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
but right in the context. But like I'm finding, and like in some ways, I'm not trying to like language is off, but like I'm not trying to memorize and understand everything. It's more like, can I connect to it when there's a need?
Yeah, you can connect to whatever is within your reach.
Yes. Okay. So it's already establishing the reach, but I don't need to contain and take, like in a way, take ownership and manage it.
If it's within your reach, it's already integrated.
It's already there. Yeah. Yeah.
What is not integrated, then we leave it in the NO as a
Okay.
task to be fulfilled.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. If it's within my reach, then it can be codified into the mind, and the mind can uh create new tools for the body
Okay.
inside the body. But the body is, remember, is the last link.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry that you brought up NO. Can you remind me what the IS is in the NO?
The is okay. Let's go look at it. Wait, where is it?
Just so you know, we're still seeing the
Yeah,
volume red document.
here, this one, right?
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Is uh is this we can say, is this ready? Is this ready?
Right.
No,
No, so that's what we're saying. It's not. Yeah.
it's not ready. So we leave it.
Yeah.
Is this ready? Sí. Okay.
See,
On.
then context. Right.
Is this ready? No. Is this ready? Sí. Okay,
Right.
on. Yeah?
Yep. Yep.
That's basically it.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
We can go into more. I have notes on that. So in the next time we meet, we can look over those. Or no, you know what? I can bring that to the cycle meeting.
Okay.
All right. So the mechanic of the events, the physical events have to do with us being able to share horizontally to create neurology, right? So Ale had this dynamic where she had two boxes and we could all put our questions there, right? So she wants to be in contact with the obstacles where the people cannot understand. But the thing is that she needs in the people's memories physical events, because if not, she says, she is going to be competing with an illusion. And when you compete with an illusion, you will always lose. But if we are competing with a common memory, you can perceive an improvement because it's tangible and because it is impossible to hide. So this is like she is argumenting the requirement for the physical events, which in my case, and Francisco and a lot of people, we only went to one physical event. So I'm like, I barely made it. I barely made it. So a lot of people that didn't, I mean, it's perfectly understandable. It is a very volatile and very subtle signal. Okay. Um, mm, mm. So she's like, "Am I a trainer?" Yes, I am a trainer. Am I recording? Yes. Um, but I am only a trainer for those who qualify me as such. If you don't qualify me as a trainer, why am I gonna go fight with a person that doesn't qualify me as a trainer? I would rather give them um let them win than try to win an argument with them. She's not gonna fight them because that is like a big loss of her vital space. Hmm. Because why? Because people can only inhabit their own reason. We cannot inhabit somebody else's reason, right? So if something makes sense to somebody, I cannot fight their reason because it makes sense to them. And I cannot expect them to understand the way I reason and what makes sense to me. So that is like also part of what Lab 12 is about, right? Respecting how other people's reasons are structured. So everybody is right. When we understand this, everybody's right because they are all standing inside their own reach of reasoning. And the only thing we can do there is respect that. Okay? And also trust the process because where are we going now? We are moving towards the improvement in the interactive memory. We are moving towards that. So trusting the process in a time of great uncertainty and great confusion is trusting the process that the intention of the Solar Code is to improve the interactive quality, the quality of our interactions, which is what was primarily interfered with the removal of the gold standard, right? That is like, imagine how much does this external consciousness know about the intentions of the Solar Code that they interfere precisely in one of like the most important, which is the quality of our interactions. It is like in that specific point where they insert the interference in the interactions because they know that destabilizing our interactions destabilizes the third orbital, destabilizes the synchronicity of the third orbital with the sun, the connection in between, right? So trusting the process. We're moving. It's gonna be slow, but we are moving and we are seeing tiny improvements. Maybe don't have really high expectations in terms of time frames, but it will happen. Okay. Um, so this is something that the interference to the solar code does not do. Improve the quality of the interactions, right? So what does the interference to the solar code do? Develop, um, oh, I had translated that word. Wait. No, not wickedness. Hold on. Trickiness. So, you know how we can confuse intelligence, someone that's intelligent, with someone that is um uses uh there's not like a direct translation, but like uses tricks to get ahead. How would you call a person? Not smart, but uses tricks.
Yeah, I mean the word is like clever, but it's a devious.
Devious,
Clever.
yeah, but because clever is
It could
still a
be,
smart person.
yeah, it's a deviousness.
Deviousness, there you go. So what the interference to the solar code does, it develops deviousness, okay? As the most important value, not transparency, right? So they use tricks to get ahead. They map others to see where they have the holes or deficiencies, and they use that to manipulate them. And when intelligence, I use my own defects and my own flaws to get ahead. And I map others to interact better with others. Okay, so if that person has a deficiency here or there, I use that map to see how I can interact with that person better, knowing their deficiencies, not to manipulate them, right? Um, so they start talking again about that moment in 2012 where it was like everybody come, everybody come. That was like the message in the field. Everybody come, the alert, right? But that moment has passed. It's no longer there. Mm, 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 mm. Okay, you guys. See you. Bye-bye. Um, she's saying people from the community need to mature personally, solarly, and socially, and provide you a platform so that you can go to a talk, um, or a course or whatever. She is talking about the people that are not going to be able to go to physical events, that didn't go to previous events, right? Um, she's saying that people from the community are the ones that are going to be responsible for that, not Ale. So Ale can only deal with people, certain people that fill these requirements, right? And we can follow what other people in the community are doing, but not Alejandra, because it is crazy. She would be in overdraft. It is a um she's dealing with groups of 100, 200, 300 people, and that's a lot. Okay. Um, and another requirement that Alejandra needs is that resonance is higher than resistance, right? Um, because that type of situation is where we're going to be able to listen openly. We're going to be able to make use of the neutral position. But when somebody listens from resistance, the position is partialized, right? So it is not an open listening. It's gonna crash directly. And I think we can identify that, right? Well, at least I have seen it when somebody listens from resistance and it's always friction. It's friction, 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 and questioning and why, it doesn't make sense, why, right? It has happened. It happens to all of us. Um, the thing is that we are entering into a constructive phase. So she is not opening the door to anybody that wants to come into the event and fight with Alejandra, like somebody that was trying to fight Alejandra in the structure of the LGC calendar, right? Because this is a concept that Alejandra created from zero. There is nobody that can come and fight Alejandra on this, right? So that's why the events are not open anymore. Um, because all of this is not in the mouth of the people that predict the future, right? It is not in the written books, in the sacred books. It is coming from a person, from a housewife. She calls herself a housewife, but she's clearly not a housewife. Um, that has no title from any university, right? And then she says she hates it when people talk about quantum mechanics. She says that that is an insult to the subatomic scale, right? And this is why, because quantum is related to energy. So we cannot describe the subatomic scale with something that is purely energetic because there's no energy in a subatomic level. Um, so she hates it. She hates it when people talk about quantum or they describe the subatomic instance as quantic. Um, because the subatomic scale is the founder of everything else, of the anatomic and irregular scale, right? And this convergence, she says, that is why she doesn't lose synchronicity. That's why we have that convergence of 20 of her days of life and the event. Because she didn't know. She realized this few days before the event, right? The table was printed. She has spoken about the event many times. These are things that are humanly impossible, right? She says, humanly, I am the last person that realizes this convergence. And then she starts to talk about the vacancy, the vacants, 90, 92, and 94, the spaces of participants in the event. She says, this is an event that had to have a 200 category because it couldn't enter into failure, right? So she needed to complete these vacancies. And she is also using these 4 channels that she calls channels: the saint, the dead, the living, and the awake, right? And she named them this way. And these are roles, these are channels that fulfill different roles that are completely unique and separated from each other, but they all integrate the soma: the saint, the dead, the living, and the awake. They are different frequencies, different channels that do different things, have different roles. So she had to complement these 200 spaces, giving preferences to the alive. But if the alive, for whatever reason, they couldn't fulfill with the requirement, then she has to do what the unified field does. She has to fill it up. So that is where she searched for the non-living antennas that have a history in the collective consciousness, which is completely important for the development, of the past, the present, and the future of the solar code, right? These non-living antennas. So that's where we have Mendeleev in vacancy number 90, which is the solar update, right? In relation to the periodic table. And Mendeleev had 69888 days of life. And then on the third day of the event, Mendeleev had 69890. So we have the vacancy here as well. Everything is all very synchronized. And then Letty says, yes, you picked it up, you captured it. And then Alice like, no, I didn't capture it. I reasoned it. I didn't capture it. I actively searched inside the memories of the container what was the best option to provide coverage to that vacancy, number 90. So it's not like she picked it up. She actually reasoned it and actively made the choice. So this convergence, hold on. when we have a synchronization like this, she says, this is what educates me, okay? Because it's something that I can argument and it becomes an understanding. So she said, I couldn't leave those vacancies empty because clearly that is the unified field that connects with my gut and tells me, do not leave that empty. Do not leave it empty. So she starts to search in the memories, right? And she starts to find things that fit in perfectly, like Morse and like Mendeleev. So we have Morse on vacancy 94. Why? She argumented the why. That's why she explicitly says that she didn't pick it up or it just came to her. No, it didn't just come to her. She actively made the choice. So for vacancy 94, when we're talking about more, we're talking about the consumption of the ROM memory, the consumption of the living, right? Because when we look at those channels, saint, dead, living, and awake, the ROM memory is where we find the living. So the consumption of the memory of the living. More. The consumption of our memory to create our codifying systems, because Morse is one of the first codifying systems, right? These codifying systems are going to go as memory units that we're going to have as part of our agenda. Okay? And this agenda is going to be connected with the real time of the Earth. So we're talking about the ionosphere. And the ionosphere allows us to be connected, all of us connected simultaneously. So we're talking about an online time, the real time of the Earth, right? Because your time and my time, those are local variables. But we actually have one single unique time for the third orbital, for the planet on the third orbital. So this codification and decodification are, because Alejandra's always positioning herself in the most precarious, right? In the precarious part, always. That's why she's using that Morse situation. So we have the consumption of the ROM, and then we have SE, which is the fourth, the unified field that connects us all, right? Okay. And then she says that finally, it is like the solar code said, you finally are using a resource that was waiting there since the 1700s. Okay. 1791, I think that's Morse's native date, is it? Let me see. Yeah. So Samuel Morse was born in 1791, which is very interesting because the removal of the gold standard happened in 1971. What does gold do in the solar code? Communicates our antennas horizontally. So, are there people that know what Alejandra knows? Yes. But are these things nourished by the same solar consciousness? No. That's a difference. So there are people that know this, but it is not nourished by the same solar consciousness. Because when the golden pattern was functioning, the gold pattern was functioning, there was growth in our interactions within humans. It was like very even. The growth was very even. But when the gold standard is broken, that gap between the rich and the poor grew, right? So this is a very human thing to do, human consciousness to do, because we do things that have really dangerous consequences. She's saying that we still have, that humanity needs 400 years to understand this. We are 400 years ahead. But humanity is going to have to live all of this, dragged around by these architects that use all of this uh, through a fake route. Okay. So it doesn't matter if the gold standard is put or taken out, because we are now using the leap seconds. So it doesn't matter what they did before, because the leap seconds are already there and they are now fulfilling a role in the unified field to create dynamic updates. And the only way to learn this, to do this, is through LGC. There's not going to be any other way to learn this if it's not through LGC. So why does Samuel Morse have vacant 94? Because we are charging a human agenda inside a collective interface. So if we later want to capture every piece of that connection and every change in that box, we have to be understanding what it is all about. And all of this is now in charge of the solar consciousness. This is now in charge of the solar consciousnesses. This is not going to be in the hands of all the ones that are escaping the entornos where they destroyed their stars. Okay, it's not going to be in the hands of those anymore. They are fleeing their destroyed environments and searching for shelter in a rocky planet, which is which is in the third dimension, right? The third orbital in the system, it's the third orbital, it's not the seventh orbital. Alejandra always talks about how they call the third orbital the seventh orbital because they're looking at it from the outside. Okay, so I think that's as far as I can go, girls. It is a very long document. I still have, yeah, 6 pages to go. So I will try to do another video within the lab with these remaining pages because I'm tired.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's a lot.
It was a lot. It was heavy, huh? I
Yeah.
didn't like the first time I heard it, I didn't realize it.
Yeah, but this was really great to hear you talk about that. So
Thank you
it
for
was really great, really
Yeah.
clear.
How are you? How was your return to home? I'm sleeping a lot, which is good.
I still feel like I have to balance things out, and
Mhm.
yes, I still feel that I am in the process. Yeah,
No, it is a lot of movement.
yeah,
I had a biologization. I got a very big cough,
Mhm.
and I almost thought I would die because I stayed within it. It was coughing and coughing, but
Wow.
it's over now. But
You're feeling better?
yeah, I
Good.
felt
But-
okay during it. I found also something to stabilize it, but I was lying on a couch and suddenly it happened. I think, what is this?
What is happening?
Yeah, what is happening? I cannot breathe anymore. What now?
Oh, yeah.
The field using your body to create balance.
Yeah, somehow, yeah.
Yeah.
And
For
for
me-
me, yeah, and for me today is also quite a heavy. Not
Yeah.
not personally, but
Yeah. I feel it too.
I feel too. It's like, oh, okay, I have to go, but yeah, it's quite a heavy day today for me.
Yeah, I feel it. I feel it like that too. Like I feel like a lot of pressure in my head. But still we did it. So
Yeah, we did it.
yay
Yeah.
us. You guys, I am so surprised because today I felt like even though it was a really heavy day and there was like a lot of information to get through, you were there. Like I'm so surprised. I can't believe you're still there.
He's still
Okay.
there.
Yeah,
Still
still
here.
there.
So it is awesome. Thank you so much. And
Yes,
yeah,
thank
I
you.
will try to do the rest of the program. And I'll see you in the
Okay.
cycle meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.